So we'll start from the beginning, and you and I kind of already talked about this briefly in passing. But I'd love to start, Ty, just with your introduction to women's hockey and the NWHL in particular. Obviously, you have such a wealth of knowledge and experience when it comes to professional sports. But love to know what's your hockey story, your hockey origin story.
So I come from minor league baseball. I've come from a baseball family, right? I grew up in baseball. It's kind of boring if I say it out loud. I grew up in baseball. I worked in baseball. I married into baseball. So I mean, it's just all around kind of boring, I guess. But yeah. So my experience is in minor league baseball. My group owns 6 minor league teams, 6 different states. Mirrors a lot with what's going on with the NWHL. We have 6 teams, right? 6 different areas. So really on the sports operation end, sports marketing, some player development. I went to a Major League Baseball scout school, and there was two women there out of 65. So yeah, that was fun. So I really felt that I needed to go to scout school because one of our clubs that I own in Pittsfield, Massachusetts, one of my jobs was tasked with developing a roster there, right? So I got a chance to get it in with some college coaches, help develop that roster a little bit. And then on the affiliated side, we have to deal with the major league clubs in minor league baseball. So I think scouting and player development played a huge part in that. Relationship. So yeah, so that world, now we're jumping into hockey, but as I was looking in the next stages of my life, Erica, candidly, I've got 2 little girls, and they love hockey, and for me it's about a women's movement, right? It's about how I can help a marginalized community and how I can be a part of that. So although I love my baseball, right, I certainly love and am excited about this next chapter. And that is what appealed to me when it came to the role initially as chairman of Toronto 6. It was something I feel very passionate about. It's something that I want to help as my 2 little girls become women. And I hope they become strong, independent, and confident women. And I think not only could I serve as a role model in my house, right, at home with them, but how can I elevate the game and attention and be a part of that, collaborating with a lot of people. And so that's what's exciting to me about hockey right now. There's some room to go, but this is an awesome time for women's sports. And I want to be part of that movement for sure.
That is so exciting to hear. And I am not going to let you off of this call without talking about the World Series. I'm a huge baseball fan myself.
Oh, yeah.
So we got to get some predictions. So I'll give you a minute to think about that. But, what you said about empowering the next generation of women for the sake of your family, for your daughters. I think a lot of people come to women's sports, girls and women's sports, through that lens. But I also would love to bend your ear as far as when it comes to someone who's been in operations, who's been in ownership. Where do you see the potential, or how do you hope to impact the potential that women's hockey has right now?
So I will say my success was around a group that had the same methodology and philosophy in that ownership group in baseball. I will echo and say that another reason why I wanted to be part of this group was that you really have some true, genuine backers here that are, in this league. As the model has changed a little bit, there's been some infusion of some independent owners who understand what we're trying to do. And that's very important to the sustainability of women's hockey or women's sport, is the backing and true backing, like sponsorship, broadcast, all the operational aspects that need to go and be choreographed for success. So it's kind of like what I was talking about earlier, is that the foundation of that, in order to take it to the next level, and especially with the way that we've structured now, the way that this league is going to present itself, is really hopefully showing outside as well as internally, with our staff, that, you know, you do need backing. That's the way of the world. You need resources, and if you've got committed people that truly want to commit to that, that is where you're gonna say operationally. So for the Board of Governors in particular, why this model? How is it different now than it was in the last 5 years? Is it mirrors a lot of what is already going on in higher level leagues and sport, right? So you have this Board of Governors now that we've instituted, and they're really the ruling and governing body of the NWHL. So you have each teams, right? And they're the members of the league. And so the members are then appointed a governor. So the member of the team will appoint a governor. So now what you're doing right off the bat is infusing new leadership. We have a huge presence the board has a huge presence with ruling and governing now, but you're elevating the level of operation and administration right out of the gate. So yes, there's a lot of protocols and checks and balances now, but I think what happens with that, it's necessary to define and elevate a level of professionalism so that we're bridging and building gaps between us, stakeholders in the sports world, and then sponsorships. And it's necessary when you're trying to elevate the sponsorship and broadcast aspect of it too, right? It's a long version of an answer to your question, but
yeah, I love that. And I want to stay there for a little bit because, again, fans that have been following the NWHL or even truly women's hockey, this is a new model to how we've seen anything in women's hockey done before. And there are not very many women's sports leagues, quite honestly, that follow this model. So it sounds as though the six governors, that each represents one of the six now NWHL teams. And my understanding is that differs because prior to you coming in as interim commissioner, all of what six people are doing now would have fallen on the shoulders of Danny Ryland as commissioner of the overall league.
Right. And it was almost like one voice. You had to look at it like that. So now, I mean, I've got six different bosses if you think about it, right? So I always laugh. My dad always says, Ty, you got to simplify your life. Okay. And now I've just added a whole bunch of bosses. So, but it's necessary because the way that the model is going to be structured, which I think from a fan perspective is quite exciting. You want to almost eliminate the one voice from the six teams, from a fan base. Fans, I feel very passionate. They're very passionate. But from a community aspect, you really want to create the marketing aspect, the voice of the club, a real tribal effect in that community. That's what's going to be successful in those markets. And what you're going to find now with individual owners coming through is you're going to get some customization. You're going to get some different voices. You're going to get it's going to be different. We're not going across one paintbrush, right? Across the league. And yes, like typical leagues and teams in other sports, there's going to be a competitive edge now, right? Like, so some resources might be available to some clubs that you might not see with other clubs, but I think that's all beneficial to the unique fabric of what we're trying to create going forward, if that makes sense.
Yeah, it makes total sense. And that leads me into something else about this structure, especially in these first several months. As you well know, two of the teams were owned privately. So two of the six teams, the Boston Pride being one of them, and of course the Toronto Six being the other. And so when you talk about that competitive edge, one might argue that those two teams perhaps are positioned to kind of take on that, as you said, unique and strategic way of going about business because they already had an owner. So I do wonder in your role and with the Board of Governors, what are the ways that the league is maybe trying to bring the other 4 teams up to speed, or are there certain things that will kind of carry over from the old model just for now? I mean, what does that transition, I guess, look like?
Yeah, so first there's, in my role as I think in 8 days that I've been tasked with this, there's a lot of an evaluation period that has to go on first. So as we build out on what that looks like going forward, there's going to have to be some institutions of a league front when new owners come in. Toronto and Boston have those independent owners, and we've been, thankfully, prior to me being on tasked with the interim commissioner role, they were working out levels of what that structure would look like for new people coming in. But, there's going to be, so like you have the league, and then you have the players association, right? And then you have the independent owned team. So there's going to have to be a map that gets laid out as from a communication standpoint, from bylaws and governance standpoint, that will orchestrate as we go through this. But it's just more of a checks and balance kind of thing. So.
Gotcha. And of course, in a quote unquote normal time period or normal circumstances, the NWHL might very well be into its season about roughly the first week or so. But of course, we all know that has not happened. 2020 brought us an unprecedented for this generation pandemic that everyone is adapting to. And so the NWHL is not in operations right now. So on the one hand, it seems like that kind of organizational flow chart and structure that you're talking about, there is some time to develop that. But it has been announced that the season is projected to start in January 2021. So given that there's some structural things that need to happen, given that, we still as a world community are evaluating the impacts of coronavirus, Ty, as of right now, would you say 8 days into your interim commissioner role, what updates would you offer when it comes to being on track for season 6 and what the league is considering when it comes to just safety, let alone starting up the season?
Yeah, great question. So I'll give you my short-term and long-term goals here, right? My immediate goals is we have athletes on ice. Athletes are literally practicing. We've got our rosters filled, and now we don't have a schedule. So in an insane amount of time, I've got to figure out what does season 6 really look like. I can tell you, myself and the board are working really hard behind the scenes in a very quick fashion to come up with what season 6 does look like. But our main priority right now, in talking about alternatives and talking about where our lines our goal is for season 6, it's really safety and health concerns. It's a weird time even to take on a leadership challenge role, right? Like there's only so much I could do over Zoom. And then also number 2, like I'm coming into a massive pandemic. There's so much risk involved, and I certainly don't want to put our athletes in jeopardy. No one does, our coaching staff. I mean, they're so important to the sustainability of the leagues. So we're trying really, really hard on burning the midnight oil to try to figure out what we could do for our fans to get some kind of semblance of a season 6. I will promise you on this that and your fans and our fans as well that we are really trying to get something of a season 6, unless we get shut down, of course, and CDC says nobody's playing. But I can assure you that we're working to have some kind of a season.
Yeah, of course, fans are excited on one hand to hear that, but of course want to be supportive of the health and safety of all involved. One other thing, perhaps COVID related, but this is the first season that the NWHL will have a team north of the border, so to speak. And so we're not just looking at expansion to the Midwest when the Minnesota Whitecaps joined up, formerly an independent team, but now the Toronto Six, and Digit Murphy, who we talked about offline just a moment ago, now serving as the first head coach for that franchise. Are there any challenges, unique challenges that brings? Or are there any opportunities perhaps that having the Six in the league bring at this time?
Sure. So there's challenges on multiple levels. So for Digit in particular, so when she's now in Toronto, but had a quarantine for 14 days prior to hitting the ice. I think yesterday or the day before was her first time on practice, right? And we all know Digit, she's got a huge personality, right? So trying to quarantine that for 14 days is I talk to her all the time.
Oh, man.
So she
I just had an image
that.
and that's hilarious.
Right? Think about that. She's the best. But so yeah, that presented challenges on the coach staff, right? In front office going over. She's got a huge roster based of Canadians. So they have their set of protocols where they get tested every week, but we didn't really have to cross borders with an athlete. So that has been helpful. But even practices look challenging. So if you get very tactical on what COVID looks like for them, there's only a certain amount of women that can go on the ice. And so they've gotten creative, right, with utilizing outside the rink, literally, and utilizing inside the rink so that we can get our numbers in there. So that presents a challenge. And then, of course, coming in with the visas and work visas and stuff like that for a season 6, that's what we're in the thick of right now. We're trying to figure out how we can get athletes over. But it's really going back, because they have to quarantine on the exit. So there's so many different things and levels that I didn't have to worry about, right, prior to this, like many people right now, operationally, didn't have to have this as a factor. And there's a learning curve here. Never really had to deal with this before. So we were definitely internally just trying to have some patience as we maneuver and try to educate ourselves on how this really looks.
Yeah, and you've alluded to it a few times, and a question that I love to ask Anya is kind of, what's on the big board of things to do, or in roles like you have, like a commissioner or a leadership role, executive role. A lot of times that's kind of measured in the first 90 days, that first 3 months. So again, all of the things in the air, they're all in the air still. But if you had to kind of categorize what you hope to accomplish in the next several months here in this role, what's at the top of that list?
So the top definitely is defining season 6. Then let's broad scale it, right? Let's see, like, pie in the sky stuff. I need to figure out what broadcast or linear coverage that this league can garner. I've got to take a deep dive into the national sponsorship and what that looks like for the league and developing some true partners. I've got to build some kind of relationships, right, with some key stakeholders outside of this league. But in long term, on my whiteboard, there's some protocol stuff that you need to develop internally that we don't have, right? So for Anya, CBA, some player bylaws, really kind of just making the league whole, and defining what that relationship looks like as we go forward. And the other thing that we need to talk about is, which is huge for the league itself, is what does expansion look like? What does growth look like? No secret that I would definitely love to expand in Canada. Definitely like to grow some markets in the U.S. Would definitely like to get Minnesota some competition. So yeah, those are all things that need to happen. I give 100-day plan. So I got 10 more days on that 90. So there's a lot of elements that are huge strategic asks. But if we do it the right way with the backing of the board, I think we'll see some good stuff. And some, we got to get, Danny's been tasked with selling the rest of the remaining 4 clubs, and with input in the league. And I think, we can start moving and making some news here, hopefully in the next couple of months that fans can get excited about.
All right. I love that. And, you talked about Danny Ryland-Kearney now, who was the founder, is the founder, and was the commissioner for the last 5 seasons. And that her role will be to find owners for those other 4. So that does beg the question. I mean, have there been some owners that have shown interest? And do you
Yeah, so I'm going to say, I mean, look, when you have news like this, it's a natural, you do get a flux of people just because they read about changes, naturally go, oh, hey, what does this market look like? I have some interest. So we've had some immediate interest in a couple of the clubs. And then, so I think that helps. Once you kind of broadcast that they're for sale, I think that, always would help the league. So yeah, we do have some interest in stuff. I wouldn't say anything, real close yet, but definitely some interest.
All right. We'll have to stay tuned, and definitely we'll circle back once we hear some more details on that. I did want to go back, Ty, before we wrap here. I've been reading some of the interviews you've given elsewhere, and I've heard you talk about the Challenge Cup. A lot of people uplifting what the WNBA or the NBA have been able to do as far as single site. Now, I know from Shelley Picard, who served as deputy commissioner, that that's not something that the NWHL is necessarily looking to do as far as a single site. But I do wonder if there are things that you've gleaned from other sports that have returned or that are in process of their return, and if there are any things that you think fit the NWHL model.
Yeah, so I think that's that's a great question. I think we're all in the middle of collectively sitting around the table and trying to figure out a lot of different things and objectives and goals. But yeah, we're influenced by what goes on externally. But yeah, that's definitely something that we'll be having discussions about, and hopefully working collaboratively together, figure out where we're going to lay out some plans in that regard. So.
Excellent. And I said we'd return back to baseball. I'm a huge baseball fan, so I love bending your ear. The MLB and even the minor leagues have definitely been impacted by coronavirus and COVID-19. But we are at the World Series, so I mean, what do you make of the product that the MLB was able to put together? And what excites you about this series between Tampa Bay and LA?
Well, so let me preface it by saying it's very hard for me with my family affiliations to ever really publicly say I'm rooting for a team. I have a team. I grew up in New York. Okay, so I have a team that I grew up rooting for. But when I was, with the group on an everyday operation level, we had the Yankees and Tampa Bay and Minnesota Twins as affiliates, right? So. I will say, based on getting a chance to know Tampa Bay in my career, I'm definitely a huge Tampa Bay fan. So would like to see just based on all aspects of baseball. Budgetary reasons, they're coming in a little bit of obviously an underdog, but then they just have such a great makeup, and they've had it for years. That front office is amazing. And so besides the fact that we had one of their affiliates, I would definitely be rooting for them. But Major League Baseball, it's really hard to have fan engagement in a time like this, right? They're really doing some really unique stuff, like the cheering and the booing, that they, to try to get fans engaged. I saw some really fun stuff during the season too, where they do the cutouts of some really, really good stuff. And you have to understand, that was in short order. To come up with all that creative, to try to get fans in, It's just weird, right? You're playing in these giant stadiums, and you have to like infuse sound into the system. It's just a weird time, but I do think they've done a fantastic job. And we might be stealing some of their stuff, right? And some of their ideas as we go forward. But who are you going for? Who are you rooting for?
See, I tend to lean National League, just because I also have a New York team that I root for. Oh gosh, for better or worse, mostly worse. But I don't know.
That's hard. That's hard to be a fan these days. Wow, that's dedication, actually.
I'm loyal if nothing else.
That's dedication right there.
But I love what you said about Tampa, and obviously they were able to tie up the series. But I think we'll see. I also, if I'm being honest, I like to be a little bit petty, and just seeing Justin Turner just thriving at third base hurts my little heart so much. I mean, I'm happy for him. I'm just more mad at.
Yeah, I get you. It's okay to be petty, though. That's fun. That's part of the fandom, right? Like, that's part of the fandom. So we could be like that. We can't be like that anywhere else, technically, but we can be like that in sports. Like,
it's expected. You roll with the punches. But no, I think it'll be a good series. I think you're so right, though, about the Rays. It'll be interesting. I don't know. The Dodgers, obviously, the Kershaw story is getting a lot of play these days, so we'll see if he can come through. But
ironically, I do always root for the financial underdog, right? The big people, and here I am in New York. I'm in New York. But I always like the scrappy teams that kind of come in on like different kind of budget, right, and still make it like successful. So I just. I'm not devaluing what the clubs that have a lot of, a larger payroll have. It's still incredibly hard to get to a World Series. But I'm not trying to put my business hat on. It's mostly like my fandom hat, and I would definitely be rooting for Tampa Bay. So.
All right. Awesome. Well, we'll see what happens as we speak. Obviously, we have a little bit of a break in the schedule. We would say a travel day, but, they're not going anywhere.
That's right. That's right.
But I'll close with this, Ty. You've given us, just a really great overview and some of your expectations. But are there any other things that you want to amplify or highlight from our conversation, or that you think are important for fans to know as we get ready for the NWHL season 6?
Yeah, I think it's just really important for our fan base, as they've been with us for a while now, right? And so I think it's important for the fans to recognize that it's a really exciting, I know it's COVID and I know it's a pandemic and I know we don't have a season 6 yet, but it is a really, really exciting time, I think, for the NWHL. When you get a renewed energy, when you get a recommitment, there's some really dynamite things that can come out of it. If we align this properly and strategically going forward with great partners, I think from a fan's perspective, they should be in for the next couple of years for some excitement. The way we want to try to market ourselves going forward to in a creative fashion. I just would like to close it off by saying stay tuned and kind of ride the excitement along with us. Truly believe that without the fans that have been existing, and of course the fans that we hope to gain, they are essential to like our lifeline in our success with the league. So sit tight. Hopefully I'll be able to have some fun news coming out of the gate here. We're trying our best to make that happen. Yeah.
Well,
fun is good.
Yeah, we're looking forward to it. Well, we hope you and your family remain safe and healthy, of course. And, best of luck from day 9 through 100 and beyond.
Yeah, exactly. So hopefully we'll connect again on some stuff that starts happening, okay? And
sounds good. I
appreciate your interest and your attention to it.
Of course, most important. Of course. Well, thank you for that. I appreciate that, and I'm looking forward to it.